with us, I thought I would just hop on to YouTube Live this afternoon and give everyone an update on things that are happening this afternoon. So, if you are just joining us now, be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to tweet this out. Make this a bigger conversation. The more people hear, the more fun we're going to have. So tweet this out. Make this your Facebook status. Post this on Reddit. Put this in some Reddit places. TikTok it. Do whatever it is the kids are doing these days. That hip, cool thing on social media. Bring a crowd, bring your friends, a lot to talk about today. Wow. So where do I begin? Bring your friends, bring your community. We can't count on the algorithms favoring us today, I don't think. And that gets to what I was going to talk to you all about. So for those of you who may not have seen the news already, one of my reports for RT was labeled by Twitter as misleading on a civil matter and essentially deleted from Twitter. It will not show up on Twitter. The RT Twitter page put out my report as a video on their Twitter, and Twitter marked it as misleading on a civic matter. Unbelievable. The crazy thing is, if you look at the report, none of the information in the report is unique to RT. All of it is taken from different sources. We quoted Donald Trump talking about a rigged election. We quoted U.S. members of Congress talking about an electoral Chernobyl. We showed clips of U.S. media, Tucker Carlson, etc. All of the fears and possibilities that the election in the United States may have rigging, may have fraud in it. And based on all the information I went over, plus based on the anticipation of violence after the election, which is very widespread, all things that are widely reported on in U.S. media, I then gave my analysis at the end saying that if this election were to happen in another country, U.S. officials would very likely condemn it as an unfair election. And I talked about how U.S. leaders have criticized elections in Venezuela, in Bolivia, and in Russia, and in Hong Kong, and elsewhere. And I just showed what's going on in the lead up to our election here in the United States, what's widely reported to be going on. I quoted international bodies, I quoted U.S. media, I showed clips of Donald Trump, and based on that, Twitter decided it was misleading on a civic matter. They gave it a cover. In order to see it, it doesn't show up in your feed. In order to see it, you have to click on this thing. They didn't just flag the report that I did. They flagged RT reporting on the report. So RT, of course, immediately after they flagged my report on Twitter, RT did a story about the fact that, this has been reported. I got my phone went off at like 4 a.m. Ding, you've been suppressed. I've been suppressed. I'm getting like a ding on my phone. I go back to sleep. Meanwhile, RT is reporting on this. So the video of RT reporting on the fact that Twitter suppressed my report was also flagged. So you can't win. Right? They are determined. They are absolutely determined not to let people see this report. I don't know what it could be. It's pretty unbelievable. This is pretty nasty suppression. There was nothing in the report that I gave, and it says, the label they gave it is potentially misleading on a civic matter, okay? Now, that label would be justified if we had been giving people incorrect information about where to vote, right, or when to vote, right? If we'd been misleading people about how to vote, obviously that would be a concern. If we were telling people not to vote, that would be a concern. We did nothing of the kind. We highlighted what Trump has said. We highlighted what Democrats have said. We highlighted what international observers have said. We showed polls about the fears of violence in the aftermath of the election. That's all we did. And they declared, and then I pointed out in my report, you can watch my report, it's on the RT YouTube channel. YouTube didn't seem to have a problem with it, that that if there was an election taking place in another country with so many concerns in the lead up, so many anticipations of fraud or rigging or violence or whatever, that the USA would use that to criticize a country, right? That if Bolivia had an election like this, if Venezuela had an election like this, if Russia had an election like this, if Hong Kong had an election like this, the US media would, the State Department, Mike Pompeo, they would all be all over this. That's all I said in my report, right? Not misrepresenting anything. In fact, not even presenting any information other than what is widely being discussed in US media. And in response to that, Twitter flagged it as misleading on a civic matter. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. But this fits in with a big pattern of censorship that's going on. We saw that Glenn Greenwald has resigned from The Intercept because he wanted to write a story about the Joe Biden-Hunter Biden scandal, and they essentially told him that he couldn't publish it if it contained any negative information about Joe Biden. So Glenn Greenwald has walked away from The Intercept because they were not going to allow him to have information that might be critical of Joe Biden. In fact, furthermore, let's remember that Glenn Greenwald started The Intercept. And Glenn Greenwald is a leftist. He started The Intercept. No negative information about Joe Biden. So he's walked away. He's not going to tolerate this kind of censorship. Furthermore, the Labor Party has suspended Jeremy Corbyn, their most popular leader in a long time. And why have they suspended Jeremy Corbyn? For saying that he's not anti-Semitic and saying that claims that he's anti-Semitic are overblown. So he wasn't kicked out or suspended for saying anything anti-Semitic. All right, let me write that down. Wrote in. Wasn't criticized for saying anything anti-Semitic. He was criticized for saying that allegations against him were overblown. Now, this is classic. This is classic. If you're accused of something and you say, I'm innocent, you're even more guilty because the fact that you would think that the accuser could be wrong proves that you're really guilty. I don't know if anyone has ever dealt with a situation like that. That's like Salem witch trials kind of situation. Right? You're for this court or you are against this court. That's like McCarthyism. Right? So Jeremy Corbyn, they accuse him of being anti-Semitic. He tweets out, no, I think that, yes, there are concerns about anti-Semitism in the Labor Party, but these things are being overblown by our enemies. Oh! Suspended. So you don't have to actually do anything anti-Semitic. You have to just say you're not guilty when someone accuses you of being anti-Semitic, and that in and of itself is grounds for suspension. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that. I remember years ago, I was speaking at a conference, and I was actually moderating a panel. I wasn't a speaker. I was a moderator. I was the chair introducing the speakers. I was handed a note. And it said, be sure to say that we have a policy of affirmative action, and highlighting the voices of oppressed nationalities, people of color, women, etc. So I just read this note that was shoved into my hand. And then I remember I got down from the podium. The panel was over. I was walking out the door, and this woman walked up to me in this very angry voice. May I speak with you, sir? And I said, sure. May I speak with you, sir? I said, okay. And she said, who do you think you are as a white man to tell me that you're going to highlight my voice? I don't need you to highlight my voice. And I said, I'm sorry, I just read the piece of paper. It's like, that was unbelievable. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I just read the piece of paper that says that the organization has a policy of highlighting the voices of, oh, are you defending yourself? A person of color is calling you out for racism. How can you be defending yourself? And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, someone handed me a piece of paper, okay? And I read the piece of paper out loud. Oh, how dare you? Oh, the fact that, you know. Now, to be fair, okay, I've learned that a lot of times when someone raises a concern with you on a personal interaction, they just want to be heard, especially if it's a concern about gender or race or something like that. Yes, Twitter does not want honest journalism, Joanne. I agree with you. You know, and so if someone is raising a concern about something you said or something they thought you said or something you did, and it's just a one-on-one interaction and they're very angry about it, they want to be heard. So I learned in that moment, okay, just let them talk, right? But this person didn't have any power to kick me out of any group or anything. They just wanted to vent their rage at me. You know, and so I just listened. Yeah, well, actually I didn't. In that instance, I argued and it escalated. But I learned later that if somebody has a criticism of something you've done when it comes to, you know, racial, gender, things like that, you just let them talk. Just let them talk. I mean, you know, there's no point, you know, and, you know, it's not really about what you did. It's about this person, you know, getting their rage out. So just let them talk, listen to what they have to say and all of that. But it's something completely different, you know, it's like, I mean, can you imagine being in a court of law? The judge says, you are charged with robbing this store. How do you plead? And you say, not guilty. And the judge says, excuse me? You pled not guilty? You came into my courtroom and said that you're not guilty of the crime that we are charging you with? Well, you're definitely guilty. Now, that's not how these things work, right? But that's how mob rule works. That's how McCarthyism works. That's how witch hunting works, right? But in a real court of law, you're allowed to plead not guilty. Jeremy Corbyn has the right to plead not guilty, right? He has the right to say, look, I think this is overblown, right? I think that the problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is overblown. What in the world is wrong with that? What in the world is wrong with that, right? That is his opinion. That also happens to be my opinion. I don't think that the British Labour Party, which pretty much, you know, strongly supports Israel, I don't think it's a group of raving anti-Semites. But apparently, Jeremy Corbyn is not allowed to say that the problem of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party is overblown. That was unacceptable for him to say. So we are facing a wave of tech censorship right now. Folks, I have been talking about the Silicon Valley fascists, how the tech monopolists, Google, Twitter, Facebook, free speech, how they think that they have the right to pick our politics for us. And I've talked about how Silicon Valley, I call them Silicon Valley fascists. Silicon Valley is crawling with libertarians and Ayn Rand objectivists who believe that human solidarity and compassion and altruism is a weakness that is destroying us. They believe they owe nothing to nobody, that they got where they are purely by their hard work, that there should be no effort to accommodate other people. They think that they're superior to others. They think that they're the motor of the world. They're the smartest and brightest, and other people shouldn't have input. Furthermore, Silicon Valley is crawling with Malthusians who think that the human population is too large. I think we need to reduce the population, reduce the number of, quote, useless eaters. Silicon Valley is not a great place these days. And if you're a leftist, right, you might be all about shutting down Trump or shutting down criticism of Joe Biden. But think about how much power these Malthusians and objectivists have. I don't know what that means. Anyway, folks, I don't have very long opening remarks for you today. There's a lot going on. I really wish this election could be over with soon. It is annoying. Tuesday is the day of the voting. Hopefully, we know the results very quickly and it's done. But regardless, we still have to deal with this for the next few days at least, and perhaps longer afterwards, which we really hope is not the case. So as a result of that, we're just going to keep going. If they shut down my YouTube channel, be sure to find out where I'm at. because I'm not going away. I'm going to keep making videos. I'm going to keep making tweets and broadcasts and all of that. I may not be able to use this platform if they shut down my channel, or if they shut down my Twitter, I may not be able to tweet there. But I'm going to keep doing this. I have no intention of stopping. I have no intention whatsoever of stopping, right? There was, for a long time, there was speculation that I was just going to go away. That was very common. There was speculation that I was going to stop, right? That, Caleb, he used to be in this leftist group, and now he's not. Well, I ain't stopping, right? I ain't stopping. I ain't going anywhere. I'm keeping doing what I'm doing. Someone said I should back up my videos. Well, I have posted a lot of my videos on BitChute, which is an alternative to YouTube. I posted a lot of them there because I know that YouTube can be nasty, right? So BitChute has a number of my videos there. And yes, start downloading them yourselves and start posting them yourselves on other channels. That would be really great. I've encouraged people, if they want to clip these videos, to go ahead and do so. But we should be prepared, right? You never should hate speech and conspiracy theory be hate speech and conspiracy theory. You never know, right? You never know what could happen. So I would encourage folks to archive our material here, post it up other places, rip it from YouTube, put it other places. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to give you a copyright complaint or anything. You can take my content and put it other places. And let's make sure that whatever happens, that the Silicon Valley fascists don't come and try to successfully destroy what we do. Let's try to hold strong and weather our way through the storm, because it seems we are heading towards a storm. There's a storm coming, and let's try to make sure that our community stays just as strong as it needs to be, and we get through the storm and things go well. Here we are. And it's Friday afternoon before the election. I'm talking to you. I'm drinking unnamed diet beverage. I also have some water in the other cup. And we're just going to keep doing this, right? I have no intention of going anywhere else. So we've gotten a few super chats already. But before we do them, why don't we do the roll call? Militias, right? Militias in Virginia. Why don't we do the roll call? So names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Albany, New York, Larry Chavista Chu. Who else? Names and locations. England, Rod Dog. Los Angeles, Sam Levin. FVK, Memphis. George in New York City. Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Seattle. Bath, England. Katz, Florida. Vallejo, California. Dallas, Texas. California. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox. Brian York, Utah, the Beehive State. Giles in Cincinnati. Julian in Southeast UK. Rio de Janeiro, Mississippi. Great Britain, Channel Islands. Queens, New York. Greetings, Amsterdam, USSR. How are you doing in coronavirus? Miami, Florida. Southeast UK. Mannheim, Germany. Eastern Oregon. Matthew in Sydney, Australia. Mo in Toronto. Very good. Space City, Toronto. Very good. OP, Florida. Caracas, Venezuela. Morocco. Chicago. Very good. Very, very good. Leipzig, East Germany. Very, very good. Very, very good. Cleveland, Pirate Alex. Very good. Who else is with us? Names and locations. I will call you out as I see you. Solidarity from Naples, Florida. Oh My Ballot. Okay, I don't know what Oh My Ballot means. Mohsen in Iran. Palo Round Mountain, California. Paul Findley. New Delhi. Dan from Pennsylvania. Rapid City, South Dakota. London. Brooklyn, New York. Arizona. Arthur Porter is with us. Very good. Very, 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 very good. Who else is with us tonight? Who else is with us? Harlem. Dante from Southern California. Very, very good. Liverpool, UK. Liverpool, UK. Brisbane, Australia. Brisbane, Australia. Folks, Cali. Lafayette, Louisiana, Jacob Maxey with us. Ireland, Dublin, Ireland is with us. Very, very good. Folks, I actually think, because this location is so neat, I might just, don't tell anyone. I'm going to pick up the camera and turn around so you can see this conference room, because it's a neat conference room. I swear it's a neat conference room. You can see New York City buildings outside. I'm not going to let you see too much of it, and I'm going to hide the unnamed diet beverage bottle there so you don't see that. But I just am kind of blown away by this conference room I'm in. So this is rare. This is a rare occurrence. Won't happen very often. And don't tell anyone. I'm going to lift up this camera, and I am going to turn around just a little bit. So I'm picking you up, right? And there's the window where you can see the New York City buildings. There you go. Good stuff, right? Right? New York City buildings outside, right? And there is the rest of the office behind those glass doors, right? Very nice. Not much to see, right? But it's something, right? And I'm actually sitting at the head of the table. Look at that. There's the rest of the table, all right? There we go. Those are the books I'm propping up you all on. This is like a corporate conference room. I feel like I'm a CEO or something. Instead, I'm just hanging out in this conference room at this lovely office that I work at, and just thought you might want to see the room, right? Isn't it nice? Isn't it really, really nice? And then we have this painting behind me that you're all used to seeing. And that is our conference room. So I'm never going to do that ever with my apartment, because my wife would kill me. I don't think she wants the rest of the world to see our apartment, but I can do that. I can do that with this conference room. So you all just got a sneak peek of the conference room. You saw what the conference room that I am in looks like. And you're sitting on a lovely, look at the wood on this table. I mean, that is some nice wood, isn't it? That is some lovely wood on the table there. And look at the ceiling up there. Isn't that some neat ceiling stuff going on there? Wow. And there's the painting behind me. You all just saw the rest of the conference room. Good stuff. It's a wooden table. Knock on wood. There's a painting behind me. I'm wearing a tie. On that tie, I have a tie clip. And yeah, wow, you saw the buildings, the New York City skyline outside. You saw the walls. I have no idea why I'm doing this, but whatever. I'm having a good time. Maybe I've had a little too much caffeine today. Perhaps I'm a little too excited. I woke up this morning to find out my tweet had been suppressed by the Silicon Valley fascists. Not my tweet, my video, my report. And so there we go. I hope you liked the little tour I gave you of the conference room. Great stuff, isn't it? Great stuff. All right, folks. So we got some super chats to go over. Keep the super chats rolling in, because that's how long we'll last. As long as I keep getting super chats, I'll keep answering questions. But not going to be on here too much longer. Got places to go. This is just something I thought I could do in the afternoon. Can anyone be convinced? Okay. Can anyone be convinced with logic? Alrighty. Okay. So someone, the first super chat I'm going to answer, someone said that they wrote in my name on the ballot, or they should have. Well, don't do that, because I'm not running for office. So they only count write-in votes if the person is officially registered as a write-in candidate. I am not registered anywhere as a write-in candidate. I am not participating in these elections at all. I'm not campaigning for anybody. I'm going to vote, but other than voting, I'm not on there. So if you wrote my name in, it didn't get counted. So people don't realize that. I already saw that question, Austin. Should hate speech and conspiracy theories be suppressed? It's already written down. It's going to be addressed. But, that's what a lot of people don't realize about write-in votes, right? They think if they write something in, it's like, it means something. Only if the person is an official write-in candidate does the write-in vote actually get counted. Only then. If you write in the name, your own name, if you write in the name, it doesn't mean anything. You have to actually, there are official write-in candidates. In order to be a write-in candidate in a number of states, any tips for historical information while studying? Well, okay, all right. Historical info while studying. Okay, so as far as free speech goes, right? Well, freedom of speech is relative, right? There's never total freedom of speech, right? Because obviously there are some things that violate the rights of others, right? For example, threats. You're not free to threaten people, right? Because if you threaten somebody, yes, you're using your speech, but you're violating someone else's rights. There's limits on free speech all the time, right? Like, if you threaten somebody else, a threat is illegal, right? Menacing. A lot of places have laws against menacing, right? If you're trying to make someone feel threatened with your speech, and there are certain lines, but there's what's called menacing or threatening somebody. You can't do that, even though it's your speech, right? There are rules about violating privacy. Right, I think a lot of places they don't allow the names of minors to be published. Right, if someone is under the age of 18 and they commit a crime, the newspaper will not print their name. It's not allowed. There are different regulations that are tolerated. But the idea of free speech is that never should someone be jailed or imprisoned or locked up for their ideas. Right, for saying something that someone else disagrees with. The idea is that as long as you are not using your speech to menace somebody else, to harass somebody else, and there are different things. There are rulings around pornography. There are rulings around indecency. There are rulings around national security, right? If you're a government employee, right, you might be using your free speech, but you're not allowed to tell classified information, right, if you're a government employee. There's always restrictions on free speech to some degree or other. The question is, what are those restrictions? The cliche you always hear in the United States is that you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, right? It's like you do have freedom of speech, but you don't have the freedom to shout fire in a crowded theater. Meaning that, if you are in a crowded theater and you shout fire and there is no fire, there will be a stampede and a lot of people will get hurt. But what's weird is that statement, right, you can't shout fire in a crowded theater, that statement actually comes from a case where it was in New York City. It was Skank versus New York. A leader of the Socialist Party of New York City, a guy named Skank, was handing out leaflets to soldiers, urging them not to fight in World War I. And he said that was his freedom of speech. And it went to the Supreme Court, and they told Skank, that him handing out leaflets to soldiers saying, "Hey, don't go fight in World War I," that was tantamount to shouting fire in a crowded theater, and Skank went to prison, and Eugene V. Debs went to prison. A lot of people went to prison for opposing World War I. That's where that comes from. I think it was Abby Hoffman of the Yippies. He said, "Freedom of speech means the right to shout theater in a crowded fire." But anyway, Skank versus the United States. There's also another interesting ruling, which, honestly, they talk about the Warren Court in the United States. When Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren was head of the Supreme Court, when he was Chief Justice, there were a lot of rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court that were very, very libertarian in nature, not economically, but civil libertarian. The amount of civil liberties we had in the country vastly expanded in the early 1960s. And there was one particular ruling, I think it was 1967, 68, maybe. It was a Supreme Court ruling called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And this Supreme Court ruling, it was around the issue of Charles Brandenburg, who was the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan in Ohio. And he had apparently bought time on local TV to have his Ku Klux Klan rally. And in his Ku Klux Klan rally, in his Ku Klux Klan robe with a burning cross behind him, he gave a speech in which he called for acts of revengeance against members of Congress who voted for the Civil Rights Act. And of course, he was then, all right, we'll talk about Wizard of Oz. All right, Wizard of Oz. Charles Brandenburg was then arrested in Ohio. They had at that point what was called the criminal syndicalism law. Syndicalism, that's like labor union activists. The criminal syndicalism law, which made it illegal. Hey, we're back. So Charles Brandenburg was then arrested for his call for violence, for acts of revengeance. And the Supreme Court ruled that Charles Brandenburg was within his free speech rights to call for acts of revengeance against elected officials, they said, because he did not actually call for a specific act against any specific person, because it was this vague statement, right? And they said that for free speech to constitute a threat, it has to be against a specific person for a specific reason. Now, I don't even know if that's good law, honestly. I think a lot of the terrorism rulings that they've had since 9/11 have said that it doesn't have to be specific. One can make a vague threat and it's still considered terrorism or a terrorist threat. So it's really not clear if that's good law, but that's a very strange U.S. Supreme Court ruling, right? The ruling that said that this Klansman had the right to basically call for violence on American television. Another interesting ruling is in the 1980s, there was a case, Johnson versus Texas. And I guess at the 1984 Republican National Convention, a Maoist, a member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, the Bobavakian group, was protesting against the Republican National Convention, and he lit an American flag on fire. And, Gregory Johnson, he chanted, "Red, white, and blue, we spit on you. You stand for plunder, and you will go under." What is your analysis of... Okay. Analysis. Socialist. Communists. Today. And he was arrested for leading that chant. He went to jail. I think they gave him a 1-year or 2-year prison sentence for lighting this flag on fire. He said, look, this is a symbolic act of freedom of speech. I was using this flag to make a political statement, and the Supreme Court agreed with him. And actually, Antonin Scalia, who was the right-wing Supreme Court justice, actually did vote to legalize... Tolstoy. To legalize flag burning. And then that became an issue the Republicans talked about. So free speech in the United States has always been a touchy, contentious thing. We got a few more super chats to get through. All right. Should hate speech and conspiracy theories be allowed? Well, here's the thing. Yes, because what is hate speech to you might not be hate speech to someone else, right? For example, right, I have gone to protests for transgender people's rights. I have marched in the streets. I was promoting the rights of trans people long before it was trendy. I was promoting the works of Leslie Feinberg and other things. But there are some despicable human beings on the internet. I don't want to go there. There are some despicable human beings on the internet who have decided that because I didn't use the right words and I said ideology or something, that I am committing hate speech against trans people, even though I have never said anything other than equal rights, no discrimination whatsoever, right? Should those people be able to silence me? No, they shouldn't be, right? Decolonization, all right. Same questions keep coming up. That's okay. That means I've got the same answer, but whatever. Should they be able to silence me? What is hate speech to you, right? I don't trust the powers that be in this society to decide what I should be able to say and what I shouldn't be able to say. Same for conspiracy theories. What's a conspiracy theory, right? Russiagate is a conspiracy theory, but it's all over mainstream media. Meanwhile, there's plenty of things, I didn't miss it, I didn't miss it. There are plenty of things, that people say that could be considered hate speech or could be considered conspiracy theories. And I don't think that it should be up to the richest and most powerful people or their political stooges or the Silicon Valley fascists to make that determination, right? And I'm sorry if that's not politically correct to say, but if you trust the American government or the heads of Google or the heads of Twitter and Facebook to decide what is okay to say and what is not, you cannot call yourself a progressive. And that a lot of the rhetoric coming out of liberals right now about hate speech and about conspiracy theories should be genuinely disturbing to any progressive person, right? I mean, progressive, socialist means you're opposing the rich and powerful, means you want a whole new world, you want to stand up for the oppressed. How does standing up for the oppressed mean empowering the richest and most powerful people to silence ideas they disagree with? I'm sorry. Yes, it's obviously important, for example, in the workplace, you can't have people behaving in a discriminatory manner or creating a hostile environment for someone, but in terms of social media platforms, the censorship is really out of control. Very, very, very out of control. Alrighty. Now, this person said that their brother is concerned about militias in Virginia. The militia movement is a very strange thing, right? I remember when I was a kid in the 90s, there was the militia movement. It was just a thing, right? There was the Michigan militia, and there was the Oklahoma City bombing, and it was this weird, like, far-right thing that was happening in the United States. It was like, middle-aged white men were forming gun clubs of sorts and talking about the government coming to take their guns away and the Illuminati and the thing high up on the thing and the United Nations and the black helicopters. I don't know if people remember black helicopters. No one talks about that anymore. But, if the sun is behind a helicopter, it looks black, right? Because, it's like the sun is behind it. And I remember there were a lot of very, very paranoid people that thought black helicopters came from the UN and they were going to invade the United States with black helicopters. And that was like a militia movement thing, a militia movement scare, right? There were all these black helicopters, right? And a lot of what Alex Jones and a lot of them are pushing now, I remember in the 90s, there was no internet. The internet had just gotten going. There was shortwave radio. Do folks remember shortwave radio? I had a relative, like a first cousin, who was really into shortwave radio. And there was survivalism, right? And these people, they had bunkers, and they were going to, survive when the UN and the black helicopters came to, seize or take over or whatever. And it was some kind of confused right-wing ideas mixed with, pessimistic disaster fantasies, mixed with gun culture, mixed with, anti-communism. And, it was just, it was a thing in the 90s. It was a big thing. That was the militia movement. And it's still around. In fact, it's intensified. It's taken on a different tone, I think, than it used to take on. I think that now, these folks are supporting Trump, and it's fitting into what the right wing is doing now. But I remember that in the 90s. Pat Buchanan ran for president as the Reform Party candidate, and he kind of gave electoral expression to that far-right movement. The Reform Party and Pat Buchanan, and there was there were different factions too. There was a group called the Montana Freemen. I think some of them are still wanted by the FBI. The Montana Freemen, and there were the Sovereign Citizens, and there were some of these weird right-wing militia groups that were around. It's a thing, right? And the Oklahoma City bombing and the Waco incident. Now the Waco, those were a religious group that was allegedly selling guns illegally. That's just a part of U.S. society that's been around, right? The right wing, the militia movement, it's really big in the West. Places like Idaho, Oregon, Nevada, right? A lot of these ranchers who own really big tracts of land, and they have cattle on the land, and they're clashing with public lands and the government. These kind of things happen, right? This is a part of U.S. society. I mean, we're all worried. I mean, I hope these elections go by and they're completely peaceful and there's no, I'm not excited about any confrontation or something happening after these elections. That'll be a nightmare for everybody. Wish this election thing could just be over with. I'm telling you the truth there. There you go. Okay. Can anyone be convinced with logic? Yes, I think so. But they have to be open to it, right? That, it's Upton Sinclair said it is very hard to convince a man of something if his salary depends on him not being convinced of it. And that, if, the main reason that people are not convinced of something is usually not that they are not convinced logically. It's they're afraid of the consequences of believing it. And trust me, this has been my experience over and over and over again. You can show people, the smoking gun. You can show people the light of day, and they'll just, no, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. And when it gets down to it, if they accept what you're saying, it has huge implications for their life. And they cannot accept those implications, right? If what you're saying is true, it means some things that they are not ready to accept that might obligate them to live their life differently, might obligate them to view society differently, to change the way they interact with other people, and they just can't accept them. And so it is kind of, in some ways, it is kind of pointless to argue with people in that way. But there are a lot of people that are very, very open to this kind of things we're talking about right now. So, it's a mixed bag. But some people can be convinced with logic. Some people can be convinced with logic. It just depends. And some people can, some people can't. Just depends. But before they can be convinced with logic, there needs to not be one of those barriers there. That they're afraid they'll lose their job, or they're afraid that they, a lot of people that I grew up with. It was like they grew up in a very conservative household, and for them to acknowledge, anything critical of that view would have consequences in terms of their relationship with their families. I've often told this story. I'll tell it again before we move on to the next thing. I've often told the story of the time when I was in high school, and I was sitting next to this deeply religious young woman. I believe she was a Baptist. I think she was a fundamental Baptist, perhaps an independent Baptist. But she wore a skirt down to her ankles every day. She's someone I'd gone to school with. I'm from a really small town. You know everybody in their small town. And I remember I was sitting next to her in math class. Math class hadn't started yet. And we were talking about the world or whatever. And I said that, when I turn 21, and it's legal for me to drink alcohol, I intend to drink alcohol. I said, of course, we can't drink when we're underage, but when I get to be 21, I'm going to drink. And she insisted, no, you should never drink alcohol because it goes against the Bible or something like that. Revengeance isn't a word. That is correct. And so she said, you can't ever drink alcohol. And I said, really? I said, then why was Jesus' first miracle transforming water into wine? And she looked at me and she started crying. I think there was something before that. She said it wasn't wine, it was grape juice. And I said, well, how did they keep it grape juice? Because it would have fermented. There were no refrigerators back then. There was no pasteurization. At that point, she started crying, which was not what I had expected. So I was shocked. And then math class started. So then the next day, before class started, the math teacher took me out in the hallway, and he said, young man, you need to respect other people's religions. And I said, I wasn't doing anything. I was just, we were talking. No, you're disrespecting her religion. So I had to sit on the other side of the room. And I was like, geez, I didn't mean to break the girl down. I didn't mean to hurt her feelings so bad, but we were just talking about that. But, she was just determined not, and look, there was no way I would ever convince her that it was okay to drink alcohol. Because look at how much she broke down just being challenged on her beliefs a little bit. So if someone's in that situation, you're not really going to convince them of anything. But there might be somebody who would be open to it. So, there you go. And that I've often noticed, the world is full of all kinds of different people. But when I was in college, I knew a lot of people who were libertarian. And they really wanted to be left. Right? They're libertarian because they're against the wars. They're libertarian because they're against, they think the corporations run the government. It's like they're having leftist views, but they become libertarians because their parents are conservatives. And they have been raised their whole life to believe that anything left is bad, and they're terrified of becoming a leftist. So if they become a libertarian, that's a way they don't have to, that's the way they don't have to challenge, because if they ever started to move left, that wouldn't be okay. So, like, being a libertarian was a way they could, like, acceptably rebel and not, like, earn the wrath of their parents, And a lot of people in the United States grow up their whole life hearing that anything left-wing, anything socialist is Satan, is evil, a lot of people in the United States grow up like that. And that's why U.S. politics gets so weird, because you have, like, libertarianism being such a big thing. Why? Most people that are libertarians should just be leftists, right? But it's like, must not question capitalism. It's like, yes, all the evidence is around me that capitalism is bad, but I must not think that, and there's a lot of that goes on, right? Not to say that there aren't people on the left, who maybe they have right-wing streaks, but they're just never going to let themselves think that way. Anyway, way too much time on this. Anyway, how do you remember historical info while studying? Be interested in it. Be interested in it. I'm sorry, I hate to say it that way, but if you really care about the information and it's really interesting to you, you'll remember it. At least that's how it works for me. I don't, people go, how do you ramble on about history? Well, I get things wrong sometimes. I try to, sometimes I'll watch these lives and I'll hear something I said that was just, I had it wrong, and I'll get very frustrated with myself. If I edit it, if I make a clip of it, I'll edit out what I said because I want it to be exactly right. You never want to make any mistakes, right? You want to make everything right, but not everyone's perfect. What do you think of Brown University? I don't know, never been there. But at the same time, how do I remember the stuff I remember? Because I'm interested in it, because it's what I'm very interested in. There's no memorization to it. It's like I'm interested in it or I'm not. I don't remember things I'm not interested in, even when I try to make myself, which can be frustrating. I wish I could force myself to remember things sometimes, but if I'm not genuinely interested in it, it's very hard for me to remember things. But if I am very interested in it, it sticks in my mind like glue. So, and that's the curse. When you're very passionate about something, when you really believe in something, it can be very easy to remember. But if you're not, it can be very hard to remember things that you're not passionate about. Okay, Wizard of Oz as a historical analogy, right? Well, at the time Wizard of Oz was published, it was understood widely to be a mockery of McKinley. Right? It was a mockery of McKinley. McKinley, was supposed to be the savior, and he was presenting himself as the savior. And, you had the straw man who represented the American farmer, the tin man who represented the factory worker, you had the cowardly lion that represented the U.S. military, and they were all going down the yellow brick road, which represented the gold standard, to see the Wizard of Oz, who turns out to be a flim-flam man and a con artist. It's supposed to be McKinley. And the way home is the silver slippers in the book, right? It's red slippers in the movie, but in the book it was silver slippers, which was supposed to be the silver standard. At the time it was published, it was considered to be a political satire, a mockery of McKinley. And everyone knew that, but then it was just such a fun children's story. It kind of caught on. They eventually made the movie in the 1930s. I don't know what the Wicked Witch of the West was supposed to stand for. I don't know. That's never played a role in the narrative that I heard, so... there you go. But yeah, it was widely understood to be a mockery of McKinley. And I know this because McKinley is from Canton, Ohio. And I went to the McKinley Memorial and the McKinley Museum and the McKinley, library. And, we learn all about McKinley if you grow up in that area of Ohio. So we widely understood that. Another amusing thing about McKinley was that he was actually shot by an anarchist. And that's a crazy story. This left adventurous terrorist anarchist shot him and apparently said to President McKinley, "This is for the people of the Philippines and the working class," before shooting him. It was pretty wild. And they gave this anarchist the death penalty for shooting President McKinley. They gave him the death penalty, but they kept telling him, as he was on his way to the electric chair, that if you'll just implicate Emma Goldman, we will, not execute you. But he refused to implicate Emma Goldman, the anarchist, and so he received the death penalty. It was pretty wild story. So this is a very broad question. Analysis of socialist communists today. I mean, my goodness. I mean, I've got video after video. I have a video, Mao and American Socialists, talking about the history of Maoism in the United States. I wrote a whole book, The Rise and Fall of the U.S. Communist Party, about the history of the Communist Party USA. This is a topic that I go into with great depth. So the person who raised that super chat, I would encourage you. I would really, really encourage you to go and look at some of my other material, because I've addressed this at great length. I am fascinated. I know a lot about the history of Trotskyism. In terms of who is important nowadays, nobody. Nobody. DSA is big in numbers at this point. The Democratic Socialists of America has a lot of money, and it has a lot of foundation, support, and it has Jacobin magazine, which is putting out their viewpoint. But Democratic Socialists of America is a very big tent. There are communists in that group. There are anarchists in that group. There are social democrats and liberals in that group. It's a very big tent. I wouldn't call it a communist group. I wouldn't even really call it a socialist group. I would call it a coalition, a coalition organization. And they're quite big. And there are many different tendencies within it. But there are many, many different Marxist-Leninist sects. I was in a sect for a long time. I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years. There's the Communist Party, there's the Socialist Workers' Party, there's the Revolutionary Communist Party. There's a million little sects. None of those groups really have any influence. I have long argued that instead of building a new party, we need a new think tank. And I'm trying to build a think tank, the Center for Political Innovation, which will facilitate socialist thought and discussion and debate. That's where I'm at. But check out my video, Mao and American Socialists. I talk about the Maoist movement. There's a lot of different groups in the United States. So that was that. I'm not familiar enough with Tolstoy's writings to comment on it. Now, this decolonization question comes up, and I've addressed this many, many, many times, but I will address it again. That obviously part of the process of establishing socialism in the United States would be granting territorial autonomy to various oppressed nationalities within the United States. That would include indigenous people. If indigenous people want to secede from the United States, wow, the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of Australia. That is very cool, David Fox. I had no idea. Wow, very cool. Right? That if indigenous people, First Nations peoples wanted to break away from the United States and have their own country, if they wanted that, that should be allowed, right? If the people of the Southwest, right, the Chicano people of Aztlan or the Sun Belt, that used to be part of Mexico and was taken over, they say we didn't cross the border crossed us. If the people of the Southwest, the Chicano nation, wanted to break away from the United States and form an independent republic, they would have that right. If the black people of the Black Belt region of the majority of the South wanted to separate from the United States and form an independent black republic, they would have the right to do that, right? But only if they wanted it. And the thing about decolonization, right, is what I just laid out, which is, I think, of course, no socialist would ever want to create a society where people were forced to be part of it against their will. You don't want to create an empire, for goodness sakes, right? The thing is that from a white person going to various people, Native Americans, Chicanos, black people, and saying to them, hey, I want you to have a separate country, sounds like segregation, right? It doesn't look good. And never would I, as a communist, be in favor of forcing that on any of these groups. But if black people as a group wanted to break away from the United States and form a separate black republic in the Black Belt, I would be in favor of their right to do that if they chose. The same for the Chicano people, the same for the indigenous people, maybe even for Appalachia. But I don't advocate it because at this time, I don't think the majority of black people or Chicano people want that necessarily. Now, I know some of the Native American groups do want that and have made that clear. And if this was a socialist government, it would recognize that, that on their part. But other than some of the Native American tribes that have voted as a tribe to secede from the United States, I don't think at this point that the majority of black people in the United States, the majority of Chicano people, want separation, or the majority of Appalachia. They might, okay? I haven't taken a poll, right? I haven't gone around taking a poll, so I certainly don't have the right to speak for them. But decolonization simply means that oppressed nationalities within the borders of the United States should be granted the right to autonomy and separation, if they want it. That's what decolonization means. Right? And I think that is if you read, this is since the 1930s, since the 1920s, this has been a big part of what communists in the United States understand to be true, right? That nations deserve the right to self-determination. And that doesn't only apply to nations around the world that are occupied by U.S. troops or whatever. It also applies to, nations within the borders of the United States, right? And that is a big part of being a Marxist. Now, what's interesting is I think that a lot of people raise that question in kind of a disingenuous way. They raise the question of decolonization to mean that like every white person in the United States should be deported out of the country because it was stolen from the indigenous people. And any communist who doesn't immediately advocate that is actually a white nationalist fascist. I've heard that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And that is, that's not serious Marxism at that point, okay? And there's this book, Settlers, The Mythology of the White Proletariat, which is floating around leftist circles. There's another book called Divided World, Divided Class. This is third worldism, and this argues basically that all white workers in the United States are not actually workers, that they're exploiters. And that's not correct, right? The aristocracy of labor is certainly a real phenomenon, that for a long time there was a section of the U.S. working class that was bought off, that had it so good that they were pro-imperialist and not class-conscious. But that's changing, right? In fact, the defining character of our moment is the demolition of the labor aristocracy. Right now, the labor aristocracy in the United States, that layer of well-paid white workers who were right-wing because they were so well-paid, that's fading. It's fading away. So right now, the potential for solidarity between white workers and black workers, white workers and Chicano workers, white workers and indigenous workers is higher than ever before, So right now, the focus of progressive people in the United States shouldn't be on, denouncing white workers as bought-off labor aristocrats who need to, or settlers or whatever, but instead should be about getting white workers who have been conservative and reactionary to stand arm in arm with the black people against police brutality, against racism, against the rising low-wage police state, and to fight for things like housing and education, etc. I think the new 5-year plan of China is great. I don't know the specifics of it. I think it's very, very exciting, and I'm glad that they've come out with it. I know that just like every other country in the world, they're trying to recover from this gosh darn pandemic that is affecting everything. But China's economy is speeding ahead, and the fact that they have a 5-year economic plan is a very, very good thing. It's a very, very good thing. So there you go. So I just wanted to hop on here and talk about these issues. I'm an anti-imperialist, I'm a socialist, and I hope that this was educational for everybody. I think we're getting towards the point where we're going to wrap up and conclude. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. But if there's anything else people want to touch on in the next minute or so, I might be persuaded to go on just a little bit longer. But if not, we're probably going to wrap up pretty soon. I wish this election was over. I am sick of tech censorship and the Silicon Valley fascists trying to tell me what I am and I'm not allowed to say. I'm certainly not in favor of hate speech, and I don't agree with a lot of things people label as conspiracy theories, but I don't trust the tech monopolists to decide what I am and am not allowed to hear. So that's my position on that. So if there is nothing further, I guess this quick afternoon stream will reach its conclusion. Remember, folks, we need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. What's wrong with liberals? Well, liberals don't understand that capitalism is the problem and that the answer is for the banks, factories, and industries to be organized to serve public good and not profits. Liberals believe that individualism is the highest good, and that they are trying to simply adjust. Do you know what's happening in Belarus now? I'm about to end this stream, and I'm not going to get into it. Is U.S. imperialism fascistic? Someone asked earlier. Well, fascism is a symptom. That's when capitalism is in decay. One section of the ruling class tries to take control and lock down the state in order to maintain power. That's a completely different thing. Don't have enough time to get into the Belarus thing. I did answer what's wrong with liberals. Is U.S. imperialism fascistic? Not necessarily. But many imperialist societies are moving in a direction where there's sections of the ruling class that are fighting each other. I answered what's wrong with liberals is they don't understand that socialism is the answer, and they're still thinking of the ideology that comes out of the Enlightenment. They want to kind of perfect capitalism. They don't want to move toward a state centrally planned economy where the needs of the people come first, not profits. So on that note, folks, I'm going to wrap this up. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. That's all, folks. Have a good weekend. I'll be back.